Hello everybody, welcome to another Albums of the Month video. This is the one for February, so we're going to be covering every album I haven't been able to talk about on a separate video for February. Now I might have missed some stuff because I did miss some things in January, and that's why there was a January album review in February, but I've been looking forward to this one and looking forward to just covering the albums on this list. So to start off with, we have the worst, and then we go from the worst albums to the alright albums to the best. It's the same formula I've been doing since I did the first one for January last year. So we're going to start off with the worst, and starting with that is Florence Black's second album, I believe, Bed of Nails, which I've never really heard of this Welsh rock band, but this one topped the UK rock and metal charts, and that kind of got my interest a bit because I want to see what it was like, and unfortunately it's a big disappointment, especially since when it comes to something that just feels more like the classic arena butt rock sound. We've had bands that have been doing this. Matter of fact, I even covered a Welsh band that did exactly this last year, which was Those Damn Crows with Inhale Exhale, and I've got to be honest, I definitely prefer that. Don't get me wrong, Florence Black have some good songs on this record. I mean, the first three tracks are just bangers in my opinion. Taxman's where I start to see the problem. You just kind of get these refrains that just either work or just don't, and the overall structuring of some of the songs lyrically are just pretty weak, to be honest. I found that with tracks like Warning Sign and Beautiful Lover, and when it got to some of the last tracks, I just completely gave up hope with this record. The Forest and Back to the End are some of the more dull written tracks. It just sucks that this album had a good start, but then it just completely disappointed in what it does. There's a few decent tracks scattered along the way. I think Rockin' Ring kind of builds back a little bit more of the energy I liked with the first few tracks. And The Way Home, I wouldn't say is too bad, but for the most part, I just don't think this record's good. There is more weak tracks than there is good, and the good tracks, I don't mind going into them, but I don't think I'm ever going to go out my way, personally, to give them a proper listen after this, for this record. So, yeah, honestly, I'll give this a 2 out of 5. Probably one of the higher 2 out of 5s, because it's okay. It's not a bad album at all, it's just quite disappointing, to be honest. We have the new one by Vertilizar titled Leave It All Behind. Vertilizar is a newish band, and yeah, honestly, this was not good. I did not enjoy this record. I got this recommended to me, so that's even how I've heard of them, but because this was on my release radar, despite I never actually listened to anything from Vertilizar unless my DJ app thing on Spotify did that, or if it just randomly played something from them. But this album was terrible in my opinion. Lyrically, I just find it very cheesy for this kind of butt rock metal sounds, and that's pretty much what it is. It's just the most cheesiest metal I have heard all year. Lyrically, in tracks like Stand As One, I find this just absolutely dumb. The stand up for your mum, stand up for your brother, stand up for your son, and then it goes into stand up for your dad, step up for your daughter. I don't know, it feels like they're trying to build more like a powerful message, but I just feel it just comes off, it's just pretentious and really silly. And then we have the track Happy, which this one has the bit where the lead singer throws out the insults that he might have been called. It's not nice to be insulted this way, but I've seen loads of songs do this, and I don't think it ever really works with the message. And here, as they just sounded pretentious to Stand As One, I find lyrically Happy is just, I cannot take it seriously. With the lyrics, you're fat, you're weird, you're scum, I wish you were dead, fuck all the things they said, rat, fag, you're dump. I think they say you're dump or you're dumb. I can't tell. There's no lyrics anywhere for this record. And then they say you fuck, you dick, you slut, I wish you were dead. Fuck everything they said. You're trash, get stuffed, piss off, I want you to cry. Lyrical geniuses here. I just cannot take this seriously, to be honest. This is just some of the worst alt metal I have heard this year. Even besides the lyrics, I think vocally, I do not like the lead singer's voice. Some of the pronunciations when he says a, like kind of like says anything that ends with a or something like that, it just kind of like exaggerate like a sort of in a way, and it's in a really annoying way, to be honest. And instrumentally, there's just nothing special about it. This is a pretty weak record. I'm going to give this one a 1.5 out of 5. It is generally terrible. Next we have the debut by Pylon Reenactment Society. So Pylon Reenactment Society is sort of this little, I guess, a reunion or like a revival of the Pylon band, which was a band in 1970 formed with the vocalist Vanessa Briscoe Hay, who pretty much been going for a while, and you can definitely tell there's that sound from Pylon from 1979 because this record has a very older aesthetic, especially when it comes to the instrumentation. Now, I don't mind the instrumentation, I think it's just whatever in my opinion. The highlight of this record has got to be the vocal performance from Hay, the fact that she's 68 and still sounds pretty good and roaring vocals, but honestly, as a whole, I'm just not very big on this record. I feel, like I said, I like the aesthetic that it brings, but I just think for this debut record, it just isn't quite enticing to me. I feel like the only tracks I really engaged with was 3x3 or 3x3 and Fix It, which had Kate Pearson featured on as well. Some good ideas, and I like the aesthetic they go for, but Pylon Reenactment Society, I did not know what to expect because I never heard of Pylon or this band, and yeah, I think while I can see others getting a good kick out of this one, it just isn't necessary for me. So I'm going to be giving it a 2 out of 5. Again, I appreciate what it goes for. I think vocally sounds great. I just think instrumentally it just is a little bit underwhelming, and I don't think there's really anything I can necessarily click with. But, you know, it's got some good ideas. Another one for the worst list we have is the new one by the Snuts, Millennials. This is the third album from this UK band, and honestly, I must say, from what I've heard with the first two records, I do kind of like what some of them do. I think Burn the Empire and WL have some decent ideas. I'm not a huge fan of them, but I definitely prefer the ideas there than to this one. This one is definitely the Snuts playing it a lot safer. There's not really anything that stood out to me other than just the most generic indie rock I have heard in such a long time. There is almost no subtlety when it comes to the lyrics. There's nothing that really jumps out at me. There's only one song I actually kind of went back into because I don't mind it, and that's being NPC. I kind of like the little aesthetic on that one. It has a little bit more of an edge to it, just in a way that I kind of like from the Snuts. But this honestly isn't it. This is just the worst Snuts album they've released, and honestly one of the worst records I've heard this year. It just isn't fun in my opinion. I can see people kind of enjoying the Snuts, and this is just pretty basically similar to their other stuff, but a lot softer. But I just feel like a lot of the creativeness behind the Snuts is gone. This just feels like a bare bone dry indie cut. Honestly, this is a 1.5 out of 5 for me. I do not like this album at all. Moving on to the alright albums of February, this one was starting off with the brand new debut record by the soft grunge alt rock band Crawlers with The Mess We Seem to Make. Not a bad record. I feel like there's ideas I really like that I kind of wish they went for a little bit more on this one, and other stuff I just couldn't quite get into. There's the softer aspect which does kind of work, but I feel in terms of songwriting, some of the tracks like Meaningless Sex and Kiss Me, just while yes talking about sexual politics, it does get a little bit jarring for me. But I think as a whole there is some good ideas that makes the album an interesting listen. I honestly will say though, when it came to the album, the deluxe side, or at least the deluxe songs, the 4 additional tracks, I felt most of them were just a lot stronger than what the album had to offer. I think Hit It Again, But Better If I Just Pretend, and Would You Come to My Funeral are definitely highlights from the base record, but I just enjoy Messiah and Lucy quite a bit. To say they're probably the 2 best tracks of the record. It's decent. I don't think it's that strong, but I don't really dislike anything on this record either, so I just kind of felt it's alright. Another alright record we have is the new one by Being as an Ocean with their 6th album, Death Can Wait, and while I enjoy the sound they are progressing with here, they are going from their old school sound, then they went to a more experimental one with the last few records, and now they are kind of pushing back to something familiar with their original sound from the earlier days of their career. I feel that this isn't quite a good return as it could be. There's still good moments. I feel GLOOM, Death Can Wait is definitely a fun one, and there's just some other good stuff I quite enjoy with this album, but I feel like a lot of it has kind of lost potential, especially Paradise in My Mind. I feel let down by that the breakdown. It felt like that would be something really sick, but it just didn't really come, and when the payoff for that wasn't really as good anyway. Honestly, I think it was kind of an underwhelming track, one of my least favourites. Again, I say that was Snake as well. It has elements I like, but I just find this one a bit too weak. But as a whole, it's not a bad album. I feel like Being as an Ocean, going for something back to something more traditional, is a better step. This kind of has a lot of the better ideas than especially the last record, but as a whole, I'm not that big on this one. It's alright in my opinion. That's about it. Next we have the new one by Mother titled Grief Chapter. I pretty much spent the whole album figuring out why it's called that. At least I kind of get it through the song's message, but then as I got towards the end, or at least around the Matrix, it just hit me. The Grief Chapter is basically a play on words of Brief Chapter, but using grief. It's clever, but the album's alright. I don't think I really had anything else to offer to what I said. The album's fine. I think there's some good instrumentation, there's some vocal passages I quite like, and a decent amount of tracks. I'd say the best stuff comes from like The Matrix or Normalize. I felt the singles are probably some of the better stuff. Nobody Escapes gives you an interesting, odd, bizarre intro, but as a whole, it is just okay. I don't really have a strong opinion on it at all, but it's interesting how this one kind of feels very different, or at least it very quite experimented into a sort of new domain than what I recognise from Mother, so I'll take that as a alright record. Now we're moving on to the best tracks of February, so this is pretty much anything that I think is good to pretty good. So we're going to start off this with the new one by the Pineapple Thief, It Leads to This. So never knowing of the band Pineapple Thief, I did not know what to expect from them, but after seeing they're a progressive rock band, I was curious, and I think this album's not too bad actually. I think especially when it gets to Rubicon, this is where the absolute best stuff starts coming in. It Leads to This, The Frost. It's just a literal best free album run from prog rock this year, I'd probably say, at least one of them. But as a whole, it's not that chaotic either. I feel like there's some good ideas that I do like, especially with the first 4 tracks. But around the second half, I find it's a little bit weaker. Now, Every Trace of Us is probably my favourite from the second half of the record, but I feel like the ideas are ambitious enough just to keep you interested, even if you had the best stuff handed to you first, and then you're kind of progressing into the weaker half. But as a whole, I think it makes for a pretty decent listen, and not too shabby. I'll probably give this one a 3 out of 5. I think this is a good record. We got a new one by the Chisel titled What a Fucking Nightmare. So this is the second record of this punk band, which is founded by Stab and Chubby, both members of Arms Race, a former punk band. Now, Stab had left last year, so I don't know how much of this he actually did do the drum work for, but Chubby's still in the band, and I honestly think his guitar work here is probably some of the best I've heard in general in his career. I feel like if you're wanting just it for a casual, just fun punk album, it just delivers everything just right. A lot of punk bands just do a lot of tracks, like 1 to 16 tracks, I'd say. You get around 16. I know bands like Rancid did, but honestly I feel like where Rancid kind of got the formula wrong, they felt like they were dulling out their sound and kind of getting rid of that kind of classic sound of theirs. I feel like Chisel has expanded upon it, and this definitely makes for probably the best record they have so far. And I honestly really enjoy it. It's interesting to see how Chubby and the Gang and this band are kind of going on together, but I feel I kind of prefer what the Chisel has to offer because I just think everything clashes pretty well. It's a fun punk record and probably one of the best albums of February. I'll give it a 4 out of 5, it's pretty good. Next we've got the new one by I Don't Know How But They Found Me with Gloom Division. Honestly, this one was not too bad. I actually enjoyed it a decent bit. I'm not crazy on the band, and I honestly never fully dig their sound, but I think Gloom Division offers a good variety of just fun stuff, honestly, especially from A Letter to Idiots of Oz. I find just every track around this point to be just banger after banger. I was a bit skeptical of some of the first few tracks, like Gloomtown Brats. I'm gonna be honest, like, the singles didn't quite do it for me. I felt the singles were kind of a little weak, and around we got to Sixth and Find Me, I kind of started dipping a little bit from the sound, kind of finding this album to not be quite as good, but I think things definitely picked up after Kiss and Tell. I think there's a decent amount of good ideas, and there's nothing that I remotely would say is weak. They definitely got a fun sound. Not an amazingly great record by them, but I think it's a good one. I'll give it a 3 out of 5. One of the best albums of the month, in my opinion, will be Darkest Hours, Perpetual, Terminal. This brand new record was one I did not expect to blow me away as much as it did, and it honestly just took me by surprise. I feel like as soon as you start with Perpetual Terminal, you're just kind of going in for some of the most chaotic moments. And one thing I noticed is that the kind of feel this one starts with is like an I'm on a Marth sort of build up, which I think is really cool for the intro of it. I feel like this album is just jam packed with just banger after banger. There is a lot of great songs, and then you get kind of a bit more of the some at least more experimental ones like Mausoleum, which actually is one of my favourites. I love the slower kind of aesthetic, and then it just kind of builds in this still aggression that this record holds. A lot of great stuff, honestly. One of my top tracks is got to be One with the Void. This one is just outright crazy and insane, and it's just paired with one of the best sort of like interlude tracks, Amaranthe, which I think is great. This album as well ends on a great note with Goddess of War, Give Me Something to Die For. Just the long intro to then just excel this energy, and just the way it just ends is fantastic. Some great guitar solos on this record as well. Definitely one of the best metalcore albums of the year. I imagine it probably might stay this way, but you never know. February has had some great stuff, and this is an example of it. I'll give it a 4 out of 5. We got a brand new album by Sleepytime Gorilla Museum. Putting the weird name aside, this is the band's first record in such a long time. Their previous album, Inglorious Times, came out in 2007, and this is the next album to follow that. They came out on the 23rd. This honestly is a pretty fun record. I feel if you're looking for something that has some great elements and blends prog metal, prog rock, and just a lot of experimentation, this is definitely an album I recommend. Now, it doesn't necessarily capture its best sound on the first listen. I feel with this album you want to give it another listen, maybe a few extra listens, because I feel like that's when the songs really peak out. It's kind of an album where none of the songs work quite as well without listening to it as a whole. It's definitely something that's should probably just be listened to normally as a whole album, but if you do like listening to singles like I do, then I can see it working as well. There's some great ideas. I honestly think after the first few tracks, which you have kind of like some interlude tracks, you just go straight into all of the content, starting with Silverfish, and each time you're just going into some of the most fun stuff. We Must Know More. It's absolutely fun with this sort of like fanfare little sound they're going for. The Gift has honestly got some of my favourite energy to it, and yeah, Burning to Light Save It, just a lot of fun tracks on this record. I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's a surprisingly good album, and I was not expecting a band that I've never heard of called Sleepytime Gorilla Museum to release a banger of an album. It's pretty good. Next we got a new one by The Last 10 Seconds of Life. This one is No Name Graves. Honestly, when it comes to deathcore, this might be one of the weaker ones that came out as I've reviewed so far. but it's still good. I feel like it has the elements for a fun record. I just don't think it quite pushes itself as much as some of the other records. Enterprise Earth took a huge risk in adding softer elements to make it more of a metalcore fused album with deathcore, whereas this definitely has more of that deathcore feel, but I just don't think it's necessarily as unique as it could be. Nonetheless, though, I still think it makes for a fun listen. The self-titled track, No Name Graves, probably the strongest track on there, but I do also like Body of a Bastard, and even Feel My Fangs in You is a pretty fun track. It's a good record all the way through. It's not crazy good. There's nothing that absolutely blew me away, but at the same time there was nothing that disappointed. I think it makes for a decent listen. I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. And finally we got the new one by Amaranth titled The Catalyst. I didn't actually know this album came out. I just saw it as I was scanning for what stuff to talk about in February, and honestly I must say I was not knowing what to expect with this record, but it actually proved to be a really fun listen. I feel with this album this is probably one of the more consistent records from Amaranth, or probably one of the best ones in a little while. I just enjoy the opening tracks. I feel like this just really kicks the album off into a really fun direction, and then as you dive deeper through the record you get some amazing tracks like Outer Dimensions, Ecstasy, Interference as well, some really good non-singles, but The Catalyst is definitely by far probably the strongest track. The way it just opens this record is a huge blast, and it holds up really nice. I did not expect this one to be a pretty fun record. It's not perfect. I feel like there were moments I kind of wish I was more going for it, because I feel like tracks like Find Life and Damnation Flame, some of the bigger tracks, as well as just some others like Resistance or Liberated, I feel while they're great, I just think something's kind of missing from it. There's definitely the sound, and Amaranth has been kind of sticking to their guns in a way to make sure they don't stray too far from the sound, while also slowly experimenting, blending in a nice balance of their metal as well as kind of pop influence, and even adding that power metal drive to it while going for some heavy ideas. It definitely makes for a fun listen. I just think some songs feel a bit barren, whereas other songs just have everything it needs it to be. So you kind of got a mixture between good tracks to definitely some great ones. So because of that, I think that roughly rounds around to a 3.5 out of 5. I wanted to give this one a 4, but I feel like just there's more stuff, there's more tracks I wish there was a little bit more to than that, whereas the tracks I really enjoyed, they're kind of like scattered and a bit sparse, but it's still a great album nonetheless. I definitely recommend this one. And that is every album of February that I haven't been able to do a separate review on, so I've got it listed onto this video. So I hope you all enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, see you in the next video, which should be, yeah, definitely March. I'm aiming to do that March, because as soon as it hits March there's a lot of stuff coming out, so yeah, it's going to be fun. Take care.